Hey, what's up, Bear fam? Welcome to Metabolic Recovery. My name is Steve Baskin, and in this training module, we're going to be talking about the sort of general overview that we're going to take. We're going to talk about the old paradigm of weight loss and the Bear Evolution new paradigm of weight loss so that you can help get a sort of a mental roadmap and a picture of what makes Bear Evolution so different and why we have a 100% success rate in an industry that has a 99.5% failure rate. So we turn the whole thing on its head, and I want you to see specifically what that looks like so that you can feel comfortable and empowered moving forward. So I actually want to start somewhere a little bit left field that you might not expect. I want to start by talking about personality. And it's going to become clear to you why I'm going to start by talking about personality. But let's start by asking ourselves where our personalities come from. Well, they come from a place called the brain. Your brain creates a personality, which is really just sort of your set of beliefs and mannerisms and behaviors. And it's designed to help optimize you and put you in a good place for the future. And when your brain creates a personality to optimize your situation for the future, it needs to be drawing upon two central information points in order to construct that personality. And the brain is going to pull upon your present environment and your past environment. So it pulls upon these two big data points, and these are massive data points, specifically to help create a personality that is going to optimize you for the future. So what might this look like, right? So this is all controlled by the central hub called the brain. This is going to be key to weight loss that we're going to talk about very shortly. But let's say someone has a really kind of arrogant, confrontational, or a violent personality. Let's go with that. Let's call it a violent personality. If someone has a violent personality, that is deliberately constructed by the brain. That violent personality is not something that is just kind of there willy-nilly with no explanation. The brain has decided that that violent personality is a really good strategy for what it predicts the future will be like. And so we need to ask ourselves, okay, well, what kind of person with a violent personality, what kind of future would they really thrive in? And the answer to that is a violent future. In an environment where people are constantly violent and using physical confrontation as a means of solving problems and getting ahead in the world, well then a violent personality is going to really help you do well in that kind of future. And so why would the brain then suddenly pull out this idea to create a violent personality? Well, the brain, as I said before, builds upon these two major data points. It builds upon a present and a past that have been ultimately full of data and indicators that point towards a violent future. And the most common present and past environments that point towards a violent future are a violent present and a violent past. This is why child abuse is so frowned upon in the psychological community and why it is so powerful when you're in a childlike environment, because the environment that you have there, the past data that you have is so small. And so the things that you teach a child often can frame and set itself up for the rest of its life, because essentially the brain is choosing to create a personality based upon these two pieces of information. And when you're very young, these two data sets are quite small. So this is essentially how your brain creates a personality to help deal with the future. Now, what would someone need to do if they wanted to actually create a different personality, if they wanted to override that personality? Well, it's very easy to do when they're young, and often someone with a violent personality didn't start out that way. They actually started out with potentially a peaceful personality, but then that peaceful personality was deemed by the brain to not be effective. So the brain maybe used a peaceful personality at the start, but then it found out, oh, hey, look, you know what? We're surrounded in an environment that is full of violent people. And so being peaceful with these people really just only gets us beat up. So, but let's take someone who has a violent personality and we want to help make them peaceful again. Well, what would we do? Well, the only real two things that we have to play with if we want to talk about making a lasting change is that we need to convince the brain that it is a good strategy to become peaceful. Peaceful, kind, understanding, empathetic. And the way that the brain does that is by looking at the past and present environments. So you just need to change the environment that you're in to be peaceful. And then you need to do a thing that therapists and psychologists are very good at, which is that you need to help speed up this process. Because the truth is, if you spend all the time making sure that you're in a peaceful, present environment, then eventually enough of this experience will feed back into the past and will actually help change the majority of the past. So you'll have some parts of your past that are going to be violent, but then you've got a whole bunch of new experiences that are coming into your past that are actually quite peaceful. And then your brain kind of makes a judgment call. And we're not too sure on what the numbers look like here and what the ratio has to be. But in general, your brain will actually make a call and say, okay, look, we're in a mostly peaceful environment now. It's mostly peaceful here. So we're going to predict that the future is actually going to be peaceful. And so we think it's a good strategy to have a peaceful personality. Now, what a psychologist will do that will help speed up this process is that they can actually go back into the past and help work with you on your past memories. And they'll have some of those violent triggers, those key moments that your brain has spotted as areas where being peaceful was not a good strategy and where being violent was a much better strategy. And we go over those experiences and we try to relive them and create scenarios or create understanding in the brain to understand why that violent strategy was okay back then, but now it's probably not going to work in the future. And so that might often relate to understanding that the person who abused you when you were younger was just one person and actually isn't reflective of society as a whole. But this is a very complicated process. Now, the reason that I'm telling you this is because this is actually much closer to how we help you lose weight permanently in the long term, because your weight is ultimately controlled by your brain. But before we talk about that, I want to talk about what people have been telling you about how this all works. And the truth is that most of our health professionals and our doctors and our nutritionists and dietitians and personal trainers basically treat fat on your body like a bucket. So here we've got a bucket. This is your body, and you're storing a lot of fat. I'm just going to represent that by these little plus symbols here. So you've got a certain amount of calories or a certain amount of energy of fat stored on your body. And well, where does energy come and go from when it comes to your body? Well, the food that you're eating is where we get energy from. So I'm going to represent that here again by a few plus symbols. So this is the energy that we're taking into the body. And then we have our energy output. And I'm going to measure that with some plus symbols here as well. And so our energy output is comprised of things like your basal metabolic rate. That's just kind of, your heart pumping and all your organs working and your blood pumping. That's a big part of your basal metabolic rate in your brain. Then you've got your exercise, just going out and hitting the gym or playing sports. Then you've got a thing called NEAT, which is your non-exercise activated thermogenesis. That's things like, let me actually write these down. So you've got your BMR, you've got exercise, you've got NEAT, non-exercise activated thermogenesis. And these three are the big main ones. And what you're doing here is in each of these instances, you're burning up energy. And so the paradigm that people would tell you in when they give you this piece of advice, which is to eat less and move more or exercise more, what they're essentially telling you to do is that if you remove here, if we're going to remove a little plus symbol here from what we're eating, and we add maybe in some extra exercise, so we're going to the gym a little bit more, so we're going to increase our exercise amount. Now we have a difference, right? We've got 5 plus symbols here, 3 plus symbols here, so our body needs to make up that difference by taking 2 from our fat stores and bringing it in. And people say, okay, well look, it's just a simple mathematical calculation. We just calculate your maintenance calories, we calculate how many calories you're eating, we reduce the amount that you're eating, and you're going to have to tap into your fat stores. And effectively, this should lower your fat stores over time to the point that you get to a healthy body weight. It's as simple as that. And what almost everyone who is a part of this program has found out is that this is not the case. And it's not the case because your brain is ultimately controlling this thing that everyone is treating like a bucket. So again, you have your brain sitting here watching. And just like with people's personalities, your brain is trying to optimize you for the future. And And because the energy output that you have is not just as simple as how often you hit the gym, it's not just exercise, it's also your non-exercise activated thermogenesis, which is how fast you blink. It's whether you use a lot of hand movements when you talk, it's whether you have a spring in your step when you walk, and your basal metabolic rate, which your brain can adjust as well using things like thyroid hormone. Now, what your brain will do in this case, and why people often experience and why diets have a 99.5% failure rate, is because, again, your brain is running very similar to that personality model that we showed you before, but I'll get to that in a second. What will happen is that when you reduce the amount of calories that you're consuming and you increase the amount that you're burning in order to try to tap into your fat stores, what happens is that over time, your brain says, hey, we're going to starve to death if this keeps up. And so your brain will actually reduce your BMR and it will reduce your non-exercise activated thermogenesis in order to reduce your caloric output so that it's actually matching your minimal caloric input. And at this point, this is what people experience as a stall, as a weight loss stall. This is where we say, I lost a lot of weight initially, and now I'm finding it very, very hard to lose weight, and so on. And that's because of this phenomenon right here. And this is why diets and exercise programs have a 99.5% failure rate. And we define that as any instance where someone rebounds within 5 years. And part of the reason that this myth is able to exist for so long is because we're all making decisions about what program we should try and what we should do based on before and after pictures. And this strategy actually works really well when it comes to before and after pictures. But because of the 99.5% failure rate over 5 years, if people showed you a before picture, and then they showed you an after picture, and then they showed you a 5 years plus picture, well then diets would go out of fashion almost overnight because everyone would see that this ultimately is a pretty bad waste of time. So let's talk about what would be a really good use of your time. And that's where we need to go back to this personality model. So again, we have at the center of all of this, your brain. Now, just like we showed before, your brain has control over your output. It can increase your basal metabolic rate. It can increase your desire to do exercise. It can increase your NEAT. And so if your brain really wanted to lose weight, it could. And so the question that you need to ask yourself is, why isn't my brain wanting to lose weight? Why is my brain choosing to keep my set point quite high? So here we've got the set point, and in this instance, we've got a high set point, and this is controlled by our brain. Now, just like with our personalities, our brain is trying to create a situation to help what? Optimize you for the future. And because your brain is trying to help optimize you for the future, then just like with our personalities, it's drawing upon two major data points to do that. And that is your present environment and your past environment. And because it's drawing upon your present and your past environment, these things become of critical importance if we actually want to put a change in our set point. Just like changing our personality, changing these things is going to be of critical importance. So specifically, the question that we need to ask ourselves is, when it comes to the future, why is our body choosing to have a high set point? Why would our body think that that would be a good strategy? In what situation would having a large amount of body fat on your body be actually a really good strategy for the future? If it was looking like a scarce future, then having a lot of body fat is a really good strategy in order to deal with that. And so just like with a violent personality type, why would the brain be making a decision that the future is actually full of scarcity? Well, often because the present is full of scarcity and the past is full of scarcity. And often the present is full of stress as well. And the past is full of stress. And that these two things combine together in order for the brain to say that the future is also going to be stressful, which is going to mean a lack of food supply, which means that this is effectively a famine. The body is predicting that you're going to go into a state of famine. So how would we actually, if we wanted to induce a permanent change in our set point, we wanted to get rid of having a high set point, and we wanted to instead have a low set point where we're slim and we're fit, well then what does the brain have to do? Remember, a low set point is now a strategy that your brain is using, just like a personality. And so your brain then would need to feel confident that the future is not going to be one that is stressful and full of scarcity. Instead, your brain needs to feel confident that the future is going to be one full of abundance. If your brain feels confident that the future is going to be full of abundance, what does that mean about the two data points that the brain draws upon to make decisions about the future? Well, it means that your present environment is not going to be full of scarcity and stress. Instead, your present environment is going to be full of stress-free abundance. And your past environment is going to be full of stress-free abundance. And this is the exact model that this program uses to help you lose weight forever and feel your best and ultimately lower your set point weight. That's how we can get that 100% success rate instead of that 99.5% failure rate. And so how we do that is by cultivating an environment of abundance. And if we do that for a long enough period of time, eventually that's going to help override your past histories. And if you're watching this program, there's a pretty damn good chance that your history is full of stress and scarcity. And this will include things like dieting. Dieting, by definition, is creating scarcity. And so we undo all of that by creating a present environment of abundance for long enough so that it can override our past. And what we do that's special in this program is that we use a thing called set point weight therapy. We're just like a therapist who goes back into those painful, traumatic memories and helps you understand them from a new point of view so that you can reduce the impact that they have on your brain's decision to make a personality type that's going to deal with the future. What we do is we can actually go back and we can give you diet programs, but these diets go for very short periods of time. We're talking about 1 day. We're talking about a 2-day diet. And what that does is your brain now can draw upon it. It can update its traumatic experiences from the past. It can compare them against its traumatic experiences that it's already been through, against these new traumatic experiences, quote unquote traumatic experiences, these 1 or 2 day diet plans. And it will say, when we have scarcity, it's minimal. Okay? So just like someone with a violent personality, they need to understand that when they have conflict, real conflict in life, it's often very non-consequential. It doesn't need to be violent in nature. It might just be a stern argument between two people. And that point, the brain feels comfortable to lower your set point weight. And this is the strategy that we're going to be using in this program. And so the two key elements that we need to focus on here, that this program is going to be focusing on, is that when we understand that the brain ultimately has the final say as to how much you're going to weigh, well, then we understand that what we really need to be focusing on is creating a present environment of abundance. We're going to focus on removing stress, cultivating a positive mindset, and creating one where you have a diet of abundance. And this is the most important. And then here, when it comes to our past, we're going to again focus about overriding diet-induced trauma, which I'm just going to write here as DIT. We're going to override these things in order to help create a situation where the brain can predict that the future is going to be an abundant future, that it can feel safe to lower your set point weight. So that's what this training is going to be about. That's what this metabolic recovery program is going to be about. It's a brand new shift. It's a brand new perspective, but ultimately it's one that is going to help get you to your goals because we're finally working with our brain rather than trying to fight against it. I'll see you in the next one.